Now the war against Friedrich Merz is starting, and soon we'll get rid of him and end up with something much, much worse. This Friday, it will be decided in Germany whether the chancellor that nobody wants will remain in office any longer, or whether he will now be overthrown by his own Christian Democratic Union in order to form a huge coalition afterwards. Because one thing is certain, if you even consider working with the far right, 30% of all Christian Democratic Union members, I have to say it, are ruled out. However, on Wednesday, Daniel Günther will come to my former town and explain it to us again. That it is very, very important to restrict opinions in the future in order to become a stable Germany. Those are the top topics today. And I would say, before I go out on a limb here, let me bring in Ulrich Jürges. How I feel as well, given what I have learned.
I could tell you quite a bit about that, but I'm not allowed to. Otherwise, I'll end up in court.
To underscore the urgency once again, did you notice? Over the weekend, there were no videos from me, and this morning, no gas meter video. Why not? I was able to look at documents that confirm that Friedrich Merz is supposed to be ousted by the so-called former chancellor, or as I like to call her, the architect of downfall, who will move towards the Christian Democratic Union on Friday and bury her Merkel supporters behind her in order to overthrow this chancellor. Because it would still be possible. Who would have thought of calling for new elections to put an end to Friedrich Merz? Even at the risk that you could form a coalition together with the Greens and the Social Democratic Party. The way things are going now, it definitely can't go on like this. Even the Christian Democratic Union has noticed that, and I'm going to share with you some of the explosive data I've seen to give you a bit of context. And anyone who knows my videos knows that the question of confidence probably won't be long in coming. If my Christian Democratic Union informants were right and have been observing
what's going on there, it's coming to that now. I think she has a keen sense for Friedrich Merz's weaknesses.
Of course, you can still remember I made the video from Kloster Sion. The Christian Social Union clearly demanded a minority government to save Germany. The Chancellor later rejected that. VELT News, as well as Arbeitsgemeinschaft der öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunkanstalten der Bundesrepublik Deutschland and Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen, reported extensively on this. Now there was a so-called cry for help from the closest confidants of Friedrich Merz. I can just about tell you that, among others, Carsten Linnemann called in the former Chancellor because they want or need to get rid of this person, or rather so that you're not, well, subject to a gag order. And apparently there were several internal discussions within the party that this chancellor simply went too far, that a gag order was imposed on the ministers. And at the same time, that Lars Klingbeil and Bärbel Bas are completely destroying this country. There was also the Focus report about this, which quickly switched over and said, that's a topic for next time. I'll show it to you real quick.
That reasonable politics are no longer necessary.
But you can see it in the federal government. You even let yourself be completely blackmailed by your coalition partner because of this firewall. The Social Democratic Party can basically push through their entire election program, and Merz just nods along. Thank you.
We'll revisit that issue next time.
Notice that even the press is now absolutely defensive when it comes to the Social Democratic Party, the left or the Greens, but when it comes to bashing the Christian Democratic Union, it's a different story. Let me get back to that explosive document where I was told again, if you reveal even a single word of what you read there, we'll have to sue you, and after that you'll have nothing left. Why this document? What's in there is so explosive that people assume Germany is no longer viable for survival. And that this chancellor does everything just to keep his chancellorship, but not to move this country forward in any way. The last cry for help was at Kloster Sion, where they said, okay, we urgently need a minority government. Even Carsten Lindemann himself said, okay, let's move this forward like this. And when it came to the point that the Christian Democratic Union leaders increasingly pushed for going into a minority government, Friedrich Merz reacted by putting a muzzle on him, or rather, on the people. After that, Merkel supposedly, of course I don't know for sure, and I don't even know if I read it that way, completely lost her temper and said, "No, that's not going to work like this. And the Merz era has to come to an end now." But if you start thinking about forming an alliance with the Conservatives now, 30% of all Christian Democratic Union members would immediately drop out.
I know that Friedrich Merz will complain. I'm absolutely sure of it. I've heard a few sentences from him. They're really for the history books, but I'll keep that to myself.
And I was allowed to read them. And I tell you, the drift that's happening, I really have to say, is bordering on absolute autocracy here in Germany. What this person is planning to do to oppress people, you really have to put it that way, and I'll go even further. The left-wing press here in Germany, especially Arbeitsgemeinschaft der öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunkanstalten der Bundesrepublik Deutschland and Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen, even had the audacity to simply delete, for example, Azerbaijan videos from you. They set them to private so that no one can see them anymore. However, the statements made by Friedrich Merz, the boundaries, yes, I really have to say it like this, to a very, very evil regime where, of course, all the alarm bells went off for many people in the Christian Democratic Union. Just imagine the situation. Friedrich Merz had made a statement. For example, yes, then we just have to forbid people from speaking. Just imagine that. And my wife would also think he didn't say that, but that's the context of his words. And my wife would then make sure that the courts, let's say, would work against these people. They would simply be locked away. Again, he never said that, but in the back of my mind, what I read there just feels exactly like that.
Friedrich Merz is not doing particularly well within his own party. He didn't manage the economic turnaround. He forced this pension program through against his own party's youth.
And now he's even forbidding his own members of parliament from speaking. I told you back then this would lead to a huge disaster, and you probably noticed. Last year I even made a video about it. Exactly on the evening of the knives, or the day of the knives as it's called, at the committee. That's when real decisions are made. And if he doesn't declare the vote of confidence by then, because money is being laundered on a large scale, then there will be serious consequences. And that's exactly the point we've reached now, that this weekend a vote of no confidence will be brought against Friedrich Merz within his own party. They now believe that there was a lot you couldn't do under Merkel, but that she was never publicly criticized. That's something we could never accuse Merkel of. Everyone was allowed to draw caricatures of Merkel. No one got reported to the police or anything like that. No one really faced, let's say, serious consequences during the Merkel era. Sure, later on. With Corinna, it was a bit different. No question about it. But overall, during the Merkel era, freedom of speech was still very strong. That doesn't mean she was there to uphold freedom of speech, but rather that the situation just didn't escalate that much. The fact that people didn't keep drifting further to the right was a situation that we just didn't perceive that way. And now the Christian Democratic Union is desperately trying to put an end to that. They want to call a vote of no confidence against their own chancellor and how they handle the money. Here's a short clip again.
What do you mean by the fraudulent state today?
Yes, I'm asking myself the question, what actually happened to the 500 billion that politicians keep calling special funds, but in reality are a huge debt program?
Nothing. They just spent it on ongoing expenses. And of course, these are things that Christian Democratic Union members are absolutely criticizing right now. Just imagine if they just distributed the money among themselves. I already told you about this in my last video. And the economy wouldn't benefit at all. At some point, this bomb is going to go off because the money that goes into circulation just for their own people would lead to the base becoming more and more dissatisfied. Do you remember the last video? That's where I brought up exactly this topic, that it would lead to a scandal. Of course, I'll link Ulrich Jürges' full statement down below. Feel free to watch the whole thing if you like. So you know I'm not telling you any nonsense or rubbish, but that Merkel really intends to hopefully bring down this chancellor. And then it's up to all of you, really all of you, that we accompany the election campaign so that a black-red-green coalition doesn't become possible. Because, well, we all know that Friedrich Merz is sometimes unhappy with elections.
He's always had really bad luck with elections. He failed twice on his way to becoming Christian Democratic Union chairman at party conventions. Against not particularly strong opponents, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, the guy from Aachen, and the Dutchman.
But there's one word I want to tell you from these documents, just one word. People say, best of the rest. That's really how it is. I like that. I really can't tell you more in this context, just the main points of what I read there, to sum it all up very briefly. The base in the Christian Democratic Union is now so shaken. There was always a conservative part, there was a liberal part in the Christian Democratic Union, and you just noticed that the conservatives were completely excluded. They always tried to find common ground over the years, which they usually criticize, but never adopted everything else just for Angela Merkel's chancellorship. They made economic policy and at the same time dismantled the nuclear power plants. It was always a give and take. Now the Christian Democratic Union only gives in order to provide the chancellor, but now he's pretty much messing everything up. He can't even deal with Donald Trump anymore. He's having trouble with Macron and many others too. So even his foreign policy, even though he used to be the foreign chancellor, is now starting to collapse. And I'll put it in the words of Suda. Right now, the situation on the Atlantic is a bit tense in a different way, but that's only temporary. What can we take from that? For example, does it mean that this chancellor will be history by Friday or the weekend?